Redundancy in itself is a fairly simple process to follow. However, with any situation where people are involved, you have to consider what policies you have in place. That's where it gets more complex. You have to consider people's feelings as well as, at the end of the day, making sure that you've made the cuts that you need to. But overall, it is a very simple process to follow. Redundancy can be a reduction in the workforce. It can be that an organisation is ceasing to operate in a specific location. Very often in this sector, funding is involved and funding comes to an end, and you have to naturally deal with that, and redundancy is very often one of the outcomes. Communication in a redundancy situation is absolutely critical. You need to keep people involved at every stage. You need to have a clear policy which will really guide the organisation through those difficult stages. But one tip is to really keep communicating with your staff at every single stage. It very much depends on the size of the organisation and the cuts that you have to make. You do legally have to follow a consultation process depending on the number of staff that you have to reduce. However, inform and consult, I couldn't say that enough. It's a really, really important process. That can be a collective team meeting. It should form the base of a one-to-one meeting. That basically, as long as you're communicating in any way that you feel is appropriate, will work for your organisation. If there's only one member of staff involved, then a pool isn't necessary. A pool is purely for a number of people with less posts, where you have to go through kind of a mini recruitment campaign, that you have to look at the criteria and their experience and the skills and qualifications that they have. It must be objective. It's in a situation where the evidence that you're using has got to be factually based. That's really important in a redundancy situation, because you're making key decisions about people that are ultimately areas which could be challenged at a later date should that person be unsuccessful. You do need to invite employees to meetings. There are guidelines to follow depending on the number of staff that you need to make redundant. However, I think it's just really good practice to always invite all employees. I suggest that we always put that in writing and then follow that up with a meeting and have a very clear structure within that meeting plan as well, covering the key information which every individual will want to be aware of. I would issue an at-risk letter in a redundancy situation as early as you possibly can. It's really critical in a redundancy situation to share that information as early as possible. So I would be holding at-risk meetings and at that stage be issuing staff that are affected with at-risk letters at that point. Within an at-risk letter, it's really important to make sure that you advise that individual that their job is at risk of redundancy. That's really just informing them early on in the process that there's a potential redundancy situation. In a redundancy situation where you've actually made those decisions, you have to have a one-to-one meeting with those individuals that will be facing redundancy. Effectively, it's a dismissal hearing. They are entitled to bring a representative with them. That can be a work colleague, an employee representative or a trade union member. But it's really critical that that meeting takes place and are issued with the relevant paperwork at that stage. Everybody in this situation, in a redundancy situation, everybody has the right to appeal against the decision to make them redundant. And that must be in the notice letter as well. To ensure that a redundancy process is fair, you really need to ensure that your policy is followed, everybody is treated fairly and consistently, and entitled to the same amount of information, that nobody receives anything more than anybody else. So consistency and being fair and objective in a redundancy process is the key to the success of it. In a redundancy situation, people are exactly the same as in any other area of employment law where discrimination is involved. We have people with disabilities, pregnant female employees, so it's just making sure that you're aware of legislation and how to work within it.